with Robert Dieudonné, live at 7 p.m., followed by Caribbean and Urban American gospel hits with Landlord and Mike D at 8 p.m. That's all straight ahead, beginning with the Political Review next here on Guardian Radio 96.9 Sunday.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Happy New Year, happy 2023. I hope the Christmas holidays were good for you as they were for me. I trust that you got to spend them with your family and friends and loved ones, and that you were on the nice list so that Santa was able to visit you and get you sorted, I suppose, with your Christmas wish list. I hope that the change of the year meets you on your feet in the land of the living and the conscious, metaphorically speaking, on your feet. My boy Cash got a broken foot, God bless him. And I hope that this year you find yourself with a clean slate, ready to create a story for yourself that at the end of the year will make you happy and proud, and that you will be fulfilling your purpose, your God-given purpose in this life, and that you feel content. 2022 was a difficult year for many. It was a difficult year for a number of reasons, but nonetheless, there were, along with the difficulties of the year, there were some blessings that were scattered throughout the course of 2022. And I hope that you take those blessings, build on them, and come through 2023 like a champion. I know that for myself, the holiday season was especially good and blessed because my daughter, Maya, is home from college. She's still here, and it's been wonderful to see her. And it's also been terrifying to realize how much time has passed and is passing, and how quickly time is passing. Last year, towards the beginning of the summer, I started sort of commenting here on the show about just how quickly time was passing. And I urge my listeners to, make the most of the time that you have, because on the calendar, it looks like you still have the same amount of time you always did. But Lord have mercy, it feels like the rotation of the earth has sped up or something, but time is just moving quicker. It's passing faster than we have the opportunity to process it, unless we are paying very careful and close attention. I feel that this is still relevant advice. I feel that we need to remember to be conscious in every moment, and that we are careful to take every opportunity that we are given, because the unfortunate circumstance of many of us last year is, those of us who had funerals to attend and those of us who lost family and friends, we came face to face once again with the reality that once you're gone, your opportunities are gone. And so while you are here, as long as you are alive, you have opportunities. And you have to seize them. You have to grab them with both hands and seize them. And as Jacob did with the angel on the road, you got to wrestle with God for everything that you can get from that angel. You've got to do it. You have to. Otherwise, your opportunities will just pass you by, and you'll wake up one day and realize, I could have been a contender, instead of waking up and realizing that you are the heavyweight champion of the universe. And I hope and pray that that you take every opportunity that you have this year. This year, this first show of the year is sort of dedicated, in a manner of speaking, to the spirit of majority rule. Over the last few weeks, I've been involved in a production at the Dundas Center for the Performing Arts of Music of the Bahamas, which was based on the seminal work of the late E. Clement Bethel on a portion of his master's called Music of the Bahamas, its character, and the piece weaves together a history of how music of the Bahamas and how our culture and history relate to each other, and where our musical impulses came from, what the modern music of the Bahamas is founded on, and how intimately related our culture and our music have always been. And one of the fascinating things that I learned being a part of that cast, and shout out to the cast, incredible people. The music director was Adrian Archer. The stage director was Marcel Sherman, and the other members, too many to name, but a truly extraordinary cast. And I hope you had a chance to see it. It was really, really, really good. But one of the things that I learned was that in the early 1920s, when the Colonial Hotel was being rebuilt after it was destroyed by fire, the company that rebuilt the hotel was allowed to bring in labor from Cuba. And Bahamians who were expecting to be able to get those jobs had to be satisfied with lesser paying jobs because all the I guess, let's put it in quotation marks, all the good jobs went to the Cubans. Now, this led to a riot on the site, and the company had to respond by sending those Cubans home and giving the jobs to Bahamians. But it took a riot for that to happen in the early 1920s. I hope you're listening to the timeline here. Then again in 1940, I think it was 42, 40, the Burma Road riots happened. And once again, on yet another construction site, foreign workers, in this case, American workers, were being advantaged versus Bahamian workers who were getting disadvantaged in their own country by work happening that they could do that they did not have access to do. Also, in the early days of the 1920s, when the Colonial Hilton did open, the hotel refused to hire Bahamians. Even its staff was white, mostly from Miami. And then when they changed that in 1925, they were hiring white Bahamians, but Black Bahamians were prohibited from accessing the property. They couldn't go to the hotel or use the facilities or any of that stuff until racial segregation ended in the 1950s. I think it was 1956. So what we're talking about here is a history going back to the 1920s of Bahamian workers not being given access to job opportunities in a field in which they are qualified to work here in their own country, leading to industrial unrest. You know, people often say that the Burma Road riots were the start of the march to majority rule. But the reality turns out to be that that was just a continuation of a pattern of behavior. And the Burma Road riots may well have been the straw that broke the camel's back. But when you consider that this is 2023, and throughout 2022, I watched as the Goldwyn property was being built, and I looked at who was on the job at the Goldwyn property, and they weren't Bahamians. So this is literally 100 years later, and still foreign laborers are being, and I'm specifically picking the Goldwyn because it's the newest of the semi-touristic sort of projects that is more or less complete. So once again, 100 years after the colonial riots, you have Bahamians not being given work that they're qualified to do in their own country. And this last week on the 10th, we celebrated the 56th anniversary of majority rule. But in this particular area, you have to ask yourself, what majority rule? Right? Majority rule is supposed to have marked the time when the Black majority won an election to govern the country's affairs. And since the Black majority won the right to govern the country's affairs and won an election giving them the power to do so. What has changed for the Bahamian worker? That's the question. What has changed for the Bahamian worker? Siri, I ain't talking to you. Oh, Siri trying to get involved in the show today. That's hilarious. So as we go through the stories on today's show, and when we get to our guest interview, I think that's something that I want us to keep in mind is there is a trend of celebrating as if it were fact this idea of majority rule in the Bahamas. I would encourage all of us to question whether that is a true statement. I heard it said this last week that majority rule is not an event, but an aspiration. And I think I agree with that. And in our first story in this week's political review, Anglican Archdeacon Keith Cartwright said during his sermon at the Majority Rule Church service at St. Agnes Anglican Church that the Bahamas has suffered tremendously at the hands of greedy leaders and called on those in leadership positions in the church and the state to set better example. Cartwright said that leadership in both church and state ought to set the right example in what they say and what they do. And he said, and I'm going to quote him here, he said, "We've been talking about a new day and saying it's all about your future. That's what we've been talking about. But if our new day is not about the things of God," unquote. Cartwright said the nation's leaders in both church and state must be men and women of integrity, of honorable character, and of honesty. He said, and I quote, "Our Bahama land has suffered tremendously at the hands of individuals who are too grabalicious. Our nation can ill afford leaders who are not men and women of integrity," unquote. Cartwright said that some in leadership positions allow power to go to their head, and he urged servant leadership or the servant leadership approach. And he said that far too many people, when they get a little bit of a position, don't check for the people like they should. He said they forget where they came from, and he urged leaders in his sermon not to let power go to their heads. The priest said, and I quote, "Arrogance no place in leadership. Service is of God, and we all need men and women of service, and our nation needs to be a nation of service," unquote. So as we just mentioned earlier in the show, January 10th marked the 56th anniversary of majority rule, and the Black majority for the first time won an election to govern the country's affairs. But Archdeacon Cartwright, however, said that the majority might hold political power, but that it does not have economic power as yet. He highlighted that while the Bahamas has made progress in some areas since majority rule in 1967 and independence in 1973, the country still faces crucial challenges to nation building, including a high level of violent crime. Father Cartwright was blunt. He said that family life, which he called the inner fabric of the Bahamas' national life, has become, unquote. He said the Bahamian family is in serious crisis and that the country cannot reach its full potential with our homes and families and our family life in such a shattered state. And our second story in today's political review the national insurance. This story gets to me. For any number of reasons, which I believe you will understand, especially if you followed my career as a reporter, or the career of any journalist who reported on NIB, going back to the 2000s. But in any event, the story is this. The board of the National Insurance Board has written to government recommending that it move ahead with an NIB rate increase of between 0.75 percentage point and 1.5 percentage point in order to begin to save the fund from depletion in 2028, as was projected in the last actuarial review completed a year ago. Last April, Prime Minister Philip Davis, and again last June, said that a rate increase was not in the cards. But the Nassau Guardian reported that the board had recommended to the government that it move quickly to effect an increase in time for January 1st, 2023. Given that the recommendation was not accepted, the Guardian reported that the board is hopeful that the necessary legislation would be amended and that the increase would be put in place for July 1st, 2023. The 11th actuarial review, or the 11th actual valuation of the national, excuse me, folks. The 11th actuarial valuation of the National Insurance Board of the Bahamas as of the 31st of December 2018 was completed by the International Labor Organization and said that the NIB would have to increase its contribution rate by 2 percentage points in July 2022 and continue increases every 2 years until 2036 to ensure the fund's financial sustainability. I hope you're listening. The report noted that NIB's annual income, which is made up of contributions and investment earnings, is insufficient to pay the annual expenditures from 2019 to 2028 in the long-term pension benefits branch. It stated that total expenditures have been higher than annual income since 2016. This means that the reserve is used to pay benefits and administrative expenses according to the law report. There are, the report noted, substantial annual deficits from 2019 to 2028. Indeed, and here's what is important to our conversation today. The report points out that these deficits existed since 2016, well before the severe contraction of gross domestic product caused by the pandemic in 2020. The pandemic only exacerbated a financial that existed before. And as a result, according to the review, the reserve of the National Insurance Board will be exhausted by 2028. Folks, it's 2023. Are you listening? It's 2023. With no change, an international organization that does not have a dog in the race says the NIB's fund is going to be the reserve fund is going to be exhausted by 2028. And we have been reporting on this since I started working at the Bahama Journal and Love 97 News in 2005, 2006. 2006 was when I first reported on it. But we've seen administration after administration come through and make no change. Well, let me rephrase. There was a hike in the contribution rate. I apologize for saying that there was no change. That's not true. But that hike was not sufficient, as is evidenced by the statements in the actuarial review that is current subject of our conversation. As a result of these financial problems, to reiterate, the ILO says the reserve will be exhausted by 2028 and that immediate actions are needed to restore not only the long-term financial sustainability of the scheme, but most importantly, the short term. NIB Chairman Philip McKenzie was contacted by the Nassau Guardian, and he confirmed that the board had recommended the rate be increased. And while he wouldn't talk about specifics, he said, and I'm going to quote from a story by that was in the Nassau Guardian. There are a couple of factors that are contributing to the declining liquidity in the fund. One is that the number of pensioners are increasing because Bahamians are just living longer than when the fund was originally designed. And the effect of this is that payments for pensioners are increasing, if not annually, certainly biannually. So you have an increased pension payment every so often. And on the other hand, contribution rates have not been increased for a while. And while there have been some increases in the insurable ceiling, that number is not enough to offset the increased payments being made to pensioners. And that really is where the tug of war is occurring. This is Philip McKenzie, the NIB chairman, speaking here. He said, you have the pension payments essentially outstripping contribution payments. So the only way to correct that is to increase the contribution rate. Let's talk numbers. The actuarial review warned that the pension benefits branch was in a severe disinvesting mode. It's at the cumulative deficit, that means the total income minus the total expenditures over the period of 2019 to 2021 was expected to be some $276 million. That's just the deficit on top of the continuous decrease in the reserve. So the reserve for the pensions branch, and the reason that this is important, folks, the reason that I keep harping on it, the reason that we've been reporting on it, is that we don't have a pension scheme that is a national pension scheme outside of the National Insurance Board. And the review says the reserve for the pensions branch will be exhausted in 2028, 1 year earlier than in the previous actuarial review. So I'm just putting that, I'm leaving some space for you to hear what I'm saying. Still talking numbers. The report noted a significant increase in the contribution rate from 9.8% to almost double, 16.9% would be required to pay the full benefits in 2029. The report added that the required contribution rate to pay all expenditures of all branches during the next 60 years is 22.55%. The report recommended that over the short term, the contribution rate for the pension branch be increased to 11% in the period 2019 to 2023. Higher unemployment benefits paid in 2020 due to the severe contraction of the GDP because of the COVID-19 pandemic increases the required contribution rate to 23.05% from 2019 to 2023. So folks, there's only been one rate increase. The rate increase from 8.8% to 9.8% in 2010 since NIB was started in 1974. So now we have the NIB chairman, Philip McKenzie, saying directly to the Nassau Guardian that is the only serious way to bring a bit more balance to monies coming into the fund and monies being spent by the fund, particularly with regard to long-term benefits like pension. The story in the Guardian is worth reading. It has a lot more nuance and some information on how to grow the contribution pool. And I seriously encourage you to go online and find it and read it. But last April, Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister, Miles Larota, who has responsibility for NIB, said that he expected NIB contributions to increase by 1.5 to 2 next year. Even though Larota said that, the Prime Minister quickly dismissed the idea of a rate increase. The actuaries, and this is what the Prime Minister said. Now keep in mind what I've already read and listen to what the Prime Minister said last year, that the actuaries over the last 10 to 15 years have been predicting that the fund is jeopardized because of us not having raised contributions at NIB. Recommendations have been made since 2003, 2004, that we should raise the contributions. Yes, this is the Prime Minister speaking, folks. I'm quoting him. We are at that watershed moment, but I'm not going to, at this time, put any further burden on the Bahamian people. We will see how we can be innovative and creative to ensure that we do not embrace such an initiative until we have brought the relief up. Here ends the reading of that particular story. I hope you're paying attention. If you have any leverage with your member of parliament, any way of having a conversation with them, you should have a conversation. Talk to them. Find out from them what they are doing as a member of the team to try to come to some kind of sensible conclusion. Because the fact is, the longer and the man that the sitting government put in place as the chairman of the board said it as bluntly as it could be said. You need to increase the contribution rate, and that is the only serious way to balance the money coming in versus the money going out. This is not up for debate. This is something that has to happen. And the man that the sitting administration put in as the chairman said the longer we wait, the worse it will be. So please get on the WhatsApps, get on the emails, get on the Twitter, pick up the telephone if you can't reach them any other way. Get to your MP and tell them to get on the stick. Something got to happen. We got to move. Anyway, the next in the political review, the FTX saga continues. I'm going to go back to the deep dives in FTX next year. I mean, not next year, next week. But this week, I want to make sure that I leave time for my conversation with our guest. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of the FTX for this week, which begin with the fact that the Bahamian liquidators of FTX Digital Markets and the new CEO of FTX's U.S. companies have reached an agreement over access to data following weeks of verbal sparring between the two camps. The parties agreed to share information. They agreed that both the Chapter 11 proceedings and the liquidation proceedings will proceed, and they agreed to determine the ownership of assets that are subject to competing claims. So repeated public utterances of mistrust from FTX CEO and Chief Restructuring Officer John Ray III were made by FTX's lawyers in court, by Ray in the U.S. Congress, and repeated on radio, news broadcasts, and print media for weeks. But finally, the parties entered an agreement of mutual cooperation on January 6th of this year. The details of that agreement have been shared in stories in the Nassau Guardian. So I would again encourage you to go to the Guardian's website and look up the details of that agreement. It includes some information on, well, you should read it. The next stage of the story has already happened, as a matter of fact. So as of later last week, following the formation of that partnership, FTX reported that it had recovered more than $5 billion in liquid assets, including cash. Andy Dietrich, he's a lawyer in the Delaware proceedings, said he touted the government between FTX US and the JPLs, or Joint Provisional Liquidators, here in the Bahamas as an important step for the bankruptcy case. And he said, and I quote, "We have located over $5 billion of cash, liquid cryptocurrency, and liquid investment securities measured at petition date value. This does not describe any value of dozens of illiquid crypto. The $5 billion in liquid assets also does not include the approximate $425 million of crypto at petition date values in the custody of the Securities Commission of the Bahamas." In fact, and that's the end of the quote. The Securities Commission recovered, or said that it had recovered $3.5 billion of assets from FTX in the days after its collapse. And just by way of refreshing our memory and keeping our record straight, FTX was headquartered in the Bahamas, and it was one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world before it collapsed last November following reports of fraud. There was a battle over access to data and other issues between FTX's U.S. debtors and the Bahamian Joint Provisional Liquidators. And since the January 6th agreement was reached, both sides have been cooperating. And finally, on the FTX front, founder Sam Bankman-Fried, also known as SBF, is on $250 million bond and awaiting trial in New York on charges that he defrauded customers out of billions. SBF has denied stealing customer funds. In a post on Substack, which is a blogging platform, SBF said he didn't steal funds and certainly didn't stash billions away. He said that nearly all of his assets were and still are utilizable to backstop FTX customers. He also claimed to have offered to contribute nearly all of his personal shares in Robinhood to customers. By way of information, for those who may not know, Robinhood Markets Incorporated is an American financial services company headquartered in Menlo Park, California, that facilitates commission-free trades of stock, exchange-traded funds, and cryptocurrencies, as well as individual retirement accounts via a mobile app introduced in March 2015. It's a big money company. The blog post on Substack was the first real detailed response by SBF to the fall of FTX since he was arrested in the Bahamas, cited to the United States and charged with 8 counts of fraud. He pleaded not guilty to the charges, and the matter goes to trial in October. So the next section of our show is usually under the radar, and there are two stories that I have under the radar for this week. Now, under the radar is usually where we look at stories that, in my view, and this is my personal view, of course, stories that didn't get enough traction, or stories that I think need a closer look or a bigger platform. And the first of the two under the radar stories for this week, acting comptroller has appealed to business owners to be truthful about their yields. In fact, Strawn says that she does not believe that the vast majority of registered businesses in the country earn less than $100,000 a year. She said that the department would be scrutinizing business turnover more deeply this year, given that of the roughly 50,000 businesses registered last year, only about 9,000 have reported a turnover of $100,000 or more. Businesses that, this of course is important because, you guessed it, businesses that provide taxable supplies of $100,000 or more are required by law to register for value-added tax and collect value-added tax on behalf of the government. At a press conference at the Strawn said that by and large, if a business generates a turnover of $100,000 or more, the key thing for them to submit is their accountant certification. So if you're a small guy, she says, a small business that generates less than $100,000 a year, you really don't have to submit anything to the Inland Revenue. What you do need to prove to us, to Inland Revenue, or justify or verify your turnover. She said the biggest challenge for the department is really turnover. What she's finding is that most businesses really do not report their true turnover. And the challenge that the department is having is verifying what that turnover amount is. She pointed out that just under 50,000 businesses registered last year. And of the 50,000, only about 9,000 are registered for VAT. And she says that what that says is that there are 40,000 businesses that are less than $100,000 a year. And Strawn said, and I quote, "I don't know about that. So this year, we're going to be asking questions. We're going to have a dialogue with the businesses as they submit their applications." I think that that is going to be very important to follow. The headline I saw in one of the dailies was businesses advised to stop lying. But I think that was a bit of editorial license with that headline. But nonetheless, there is something there. Because I think I agree with Ms. Strawn. I don't think if you have 50,000 businesses registered, I don't know that 40,000 of them are that unprofitable. Well, when thoughts on that too? That'll be interesting. So I will refrain from making any comment on that. The second story under the radar is that there is no timeline as yet for the introduction of the marital rape bill, or a bill that would allow Bahamian men and women to pass on citizenship in all circumstances. Last year, Attorney General Ryan Pinder said the government would bring a bill to deal with citizenship. And he also shared a draft bill to criminalize marital rape with stakeholders, saying that I think in both cases, those bills were supposed to be tabled before the end of last calendar year. And Press Secretary Clint Watson has been questioned on when those bills will be tabled in Parliament. And according to him, there's no time frame yet. He says the reason why there is no time frame on it is because they actually want to exhaust all avenues in addressing and looking at the proposed legislation. There's supposed to be a second meeting with the Baptist community and so on and so forth. I don't want to say this next part, but I have to. Perhaps the reason for that second meeting is because following a one-day symposium on the marital rape bill held by the Department of Gender Affairs last year, the president of the Bahamas Baptist Convention, Reverend Lloyd Smith, said that a husband cannot rape his wife. He said, if you roll over in the night and touch your wife, that should not be criminalized. What Watson said was that the Minister of Social Services, Obi Wilshcombe, and others also want to meet with the Christian Council to make sure there's clarity on the proposed legislation, which hasn't happened yet. So there's no time frame, but of course, both bills are accusing the government of stalling. In fact, Attorney Marion Bethel said last year that it's time for the government to take a leadership position and do what's morally right and just in regard to the issue of marital immunity. Bethel is the Bahamas' representative on the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I'm going to stop that one there and point out to you that I think part of the challenge with making promises from the political platform is that you build an expectation of a certain kind of culture or direction you want to take. And when you are not able to fulfill those promises, narrative in a way that I don't think the administration is doing properly. Then, of course, there's also the simple expedient of not making promises. from the political arena. But that's impossible to do, I suppose. In my last story, our top story of today, Bahamas Bar Association President Khalil Parker used his address at the opening of the legal year to demand transparency through the full implementation of the Freedom of Information Act. Parker also called for action on eliminating discrimination in the area of citizenship, and he addressed the controversial marital rape issue. The Bahamas Bar Association, he said, has consistently urged and demanded a public commitment to transparency and full implementation of the freedom is no longer merely an aspiration. According to Parker, implementing a FOIA represents bare minimum required to demonstrate a true commitment to transparency and to delivering to the Bahamian people the meaningful right to scrutiny that they deserve. Excuse me just one moment, people. I'm just going to. So sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah. He also said that the Bar Association welcomed the government's commitment to addressing the longstanding and vexing issue of the disparate treatment of the children of Bahamians and their access to Bahamian citizenship, which is their birthright. As for the avoidance of any doubt, Mr. Parker said there is no place for rape in either Bahamian society or marriages. The fact is that transparency and accountability, citizenship, and marital rape have all been major issues featured in debates in various public spheres. The Christie administration passed a revamped version of the Freedom of Information Act in 2017. However, the administration did not fully implement it. The Minutes administration brought the law into force, but again, the public is not yet in a position to benefit from it. In November of last year, Freedom of Information Commissioner Keith Thompson told the Nassau Guardian that the Freedom of Information Office expected to start training managers, information managers, early 2023 in the use of the technology that would be used for the requesting and complying with the deadlines under the Freedom of Information Act, and in being able to decipher information that ought to be redacted. Redacted meaning prevented from public scrutiny. I think that these are some critical issues here. And I applaud the Bar Association's president on holding the administration accountable. Parker also seemed to reference the collapse of FTX, which would have brought into scrutiny the Bahamas' judicial and regulatory environments. And what he said on that is, and I quote, "Recent events have highlighted the fact that our continued national advance on the global stage places increased scrutiny on the integrity and efficacy of our public institutions and constitutional infrastructure. It is imperative that we fix the proverbial roof while the sun is shining, as the damage unprepared is not only potentially devastating domestically, but can become fodder for international pundits and commentators instantaneously. The capacity and integrity of our judicial system is as critical to safeguarding the rights hopes, and aspirations of the Bahamian people as it is to our efforts to expand and develop our economy. Regard for the rule of law, he said, and the proper administration of justice is integral to every aspect of public and private endeavor, and it is the fundamental safeguard against corruption, unquote. What's funny is that the ceremony marking the opening of the legal year took place at the Point in downtown Nassau, as the traditional venue, that would be the main Supreme Court building, is being renovated. And those are the stories in the political review for this week. When we come back, I hope to be joined by our special guest, and we will have a fascinating conversation about the coming year in both politics, legislation, and cultural expectations. And I'm excited about that conversation. Let's go ahead, Wally, and take a break now. And we will see you folks on the other side of this break here on the Political Review. It's 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, the 15th of January, 2023. We'll be right back.
Have you taken a look at those investment options yet?
Too busy. Look at today. Workout, breakfast, drop kids at school, back-to-back meetings, dog from the groomer, nails. And that's all before 12. How come you're so chill?
That's because my money is as busy as you.
At RF, we find the best Bahamian and international investments to keep your money busy so you can spend more time focusing on you. Contact us at RF Money at Work.
Loss of family members is very isolating, and people who have experienced loss appreciate when others have shared their grief. If you can't be there in person, go to the Nassau Guardian's website online at thenassauguardian.com and visit our obituary link. The Nassau Guardian's interactive obituary link allows you to read the funeral announcement, express condolences, or place photos on the online guest book for 1 full year. Losing a loved one is painful, but that pain isn't the worst thing to happen. Friends, loved ones, colleagues, and neighbors who ignore the loss compound the pain. Should the bereaved family wish to place the obituary and photos on our obituary site, just contact the Guardian's Funeral Industry Partners or the Nassau Guardian. Remember, there isn't one magic right thing to say to someone experiencing loss that will make the loss less painful or easier to bear. The Nassau Guardian's obituary link, available online at thenassauguardian.com.
It's here, my Solomon Smart Rewards, the ultimate loyalty rewards program. At Solomon's, Fresh Market, or Exuma Markets, start earning smart rewards every time you shop on every item you purchase. Every dollar you spend will earn you 1 Smart Rewards point, and points are redeemable in all participating locations. Getting started is quick and easy. Earn smart rewards every time you shop at Solomon's, Fresh Market, or Exuma Market.
Do you know you can get your business cards designed and printed for as low as 18 cents a card? If it's a poster you want, you can pay as little as $6 a square foot. If your print needs are short or long run, digital printing, wide format, or print consultation, call the best. Call Print Masters. Print Masters' goal is to provide its clients with the highest level of personal, professional service at an affordable price. Our state-of-the-art technology also makes working together efficient and easy. Laminations, business cards, flyers, posters, window and floor decals are just a few of the digitized print services offered at Print Masters.
Let Print Masters bring your masterpiece to life.
Located in the Nassau Guardian Building, telephone 302-2361.
At a time when jobs are hard to find, crime is a concern, and Bahamians are uncertain about the future of the country, there is one paper you can rely on as your source of news and commentary. The Nassau Guardian delves deeper into the issues. We ask the tough questions. We tell your stories. If you haven't already, pick up a copy today. The Nassau Guardian. News and views that matter since 1844.
What if I told you that the future is here? That is not some magical door we walk through, but a place we create. It's home. It's a place where you can download a 2-hour movie in seconds and stay connected to love traveling far from home, where internet moves at lightning speeds, smoother and more reliable than anything you've ever seen. This future-proof technology can take you to worlds that you can only imagine. The future is here. The future is home. The future is Alive Fiber.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Political Review. My name is Quincy Parker. It is absolutely my pleasure to be with you. This is our first live show for the year, and I'm excited about going in 2023. The fact is that as I said at the beginning of the show, the show today is kind of dedicated around the theme of majority rule, but I also wanted to have a look at what we should really be expecting from the legislative agenda, from the political directorate, over the next year, and a couple of things came up in our week in review that I would also like to maybe get some expanded views on, and I'm excited to have with us this afternoon a friend of mine, a senior of mine in a couple of different arenas. The host of Live with, Z Live, the Honorable Executive Director of the City of the Bahamas, Mr. Zhivago Lang. Mr. Zhivago Lang, welcome back to the Political Review. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
It's my pleasure, Quincy, and thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Zhivago Lang. Let's start with majority rule. Keith Cartwright, the Archdeacon, the Anglican Archdeacon, was, in my view, very very blunt and on point in many areas, I thought, about the state of affairs of the country, particularly with regard to the state of leadership, both in the church and in the state. I won't ask you to say whether the Father Cartwright was right or wrong, but I will ask whether or not you see, as he seems to, the fate of the Bahamas as having been adversely affected at the hands of leaders who are not men and women of integrity.
Well, I can say that I believe that it is a fair comment that there have been leaders in our country who have been more selfish, and some might say greedy, putting their interest above the interest of the country. I believe that that's a fair comment. I think the opposite is also true. There have been selfless, very dedicated men and women in leadership of integrity. And now the question is to what extent either side is true and whether or not it has adversely affected the country. Anytime a human being doesn't live up to his or her potential, anytime he or she in leadership chooses a path that is not as filled with dedication, loyalty, commitment, integrity, you always lose something. You always lose something. There's no question about that. I mean, it happens in a family, it happens in a church, it happens in a business. So you always lose something. So again, that's a fair comment. But we know, we can see where we have made progress in areas of the country over the years. And I submit that progress is also a contribution of leadership. And so, frankly, what Archdeacon Cartwright said could have been said 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. This is a part of the human condition that has been perennial.
And do you let's I don't want to
the fact that it's perennial doesn't make it less true and doesn't ignore the urgings to do better. So let's be clear. Okay.
For sure, yeah. But I was hesitant to delve too much deeper into this because this could easily be the whole conversation. But and I have like a list of other things I want to ask you about. But I have to ask though, the statement of us as a country having achieved majority rule. It's one of those things. It's almost a perennial conversation. How close are we to actually, in your view, having that statement be true?
Well, the statement is true right now, today, and was from day one, to the extent that it was a statement about who controlled the political strings of the country. Because remember what it says, majority. The majority was a reference to what? The black skins of Bahamians. The minority was a reference to the white skins of Bahamian. And the victory was a political victory on January 10th, 1967. So is it true now that the minority white-skinned Bahamians control the political machinery of the country? So the celebration on January 10th was a celebration of that victory. So to the extent that it was true on that day and remains the case this day means that it is absolutely true.
but you and I would accept. Well, let me rephrase. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So I accept Father Cartwright's argument that while we may hold political power as the black-skinned majority, we do not hold economic power.
Yeah, but let's continue to define what we define as the victory, though. I mean, we can't revisit history. We said we achieved majority rule on January 10th, 1967. That was a political ambition, and it was a political objective that was achieved. So we can't now revisit the fact. Now, if we want to comment that since achieving that political majority status, other areas of our life remains dominated by the white-skinned minority of our country, that's a different argument, and that's a different discussion.
And the reason that I again because this is easily a 2-week long conversation, but the question is
facts.
Not on the facts, not on the facts.
Yeah, on the discussion, yeah.
But that's the question ultimately, though, is whether or not political leadership or political power without economic power is it true power? Is it useful?
Well, first of all, anyone coming to this discussion with me without evidence to support the notion of where the power is going to get a very long discussion from me. Because what's the evidence of that? Okay, so let me give an example. The Bahamas is not one single sector economy. It is not. It is a multi-sectored economy. And if you want to make an argument, for instance, in some of those sectors, the argument will not be about white-skinned minority dominance. It will be about foreign dominance versus Bahamian dominance. If you look at wholesale and retail trade, you have to be careful how you argue that it is dominated by white-skinned Bahamians, because the ownership of the wholesale component of the trade may well be white. But of the ownership of the retail trade, we know in some areas of the stores, like the food stores, might be a dominant white-skinned Bahamian man, but in many other store areas, the domination is by white, black-skinned Bahamians, right? If not foreigners. If you look at the financial services sector, it's dominated not by white-skinned Bahamians, it's dominated by foreign concerns versus Bahamians. If you look at the professional classes, the professional sectors like accounting and law, they're not dominated by the white-skinned Bahamians, they're dominated by the black-skinned Bahamians. If you look at engineering sector, similarly, and so forth. So we have to come at this argument with a little bit more sophistication and evidence to support what we're saying. If we're looking at ourselves relative to prior to January 10th, 1967.
And I don't disagree with that. I would question then, because there is, you would admit, a stream of conversation in the political narrative, and to an extent outside of politics as well, suggests that even though we have achieved the political goal of majority rule, the reality is that the white people still control the economy. You would accept?
I do not agree with that. I do not agree with that.
Right, but you would accept that it's part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree that is a conversation that's happening.
Yeah.
What I agree is that there are some segments of the Bahamian economy where they continue to dominate. For instance, in the shipping area, they continue to dominate. In the wholesale area, they continue to dominate. They are quite powerful in the retail trade area, but in the rest of the economy, in media, in in tourism, in financial services, in the professional services, in the medical services. They are not the dominant class at all. They are not. The problem is where they dominate, and have dominated, they are relatively big areas that's quite obvious.
Yeah.
Right? But in the other areas of the economy where Bahamians dominate, if you put their collective power together, they look impressive. But if in their individual powers, they may not. Okay, if you this year, the Sunshine Boys will celebrate 50 years as a group. They are a significant force in this country. All right? So you know that's not a small matter, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the restaurant business, they're not dominated. It's not dominated by white-skinned Bahamians. It's dominated by Black Bahamians. Now, if we don't find that impressive, that's on us. But that's the reality.
Mm-hmm. So, in an attempt to conclude our very brief and very shallow discussion on majority rule, where do you think we stand as a country with regard to majority rule here in 2023?
Well, I mean, the rule.
Or is our job finished? I guess is what I'm asking.
What? And insofar as the political, why is?
I'm sorry. The internet.
I'm okay. I'm not sure what that was. Sorry about that. But insofar as the political power is concerned, I mean, we achieved that for sure. Now, the aspiration to be a more potent economic force in the country remains quite open. I mean, clearly, right? We have 50,000 businesses registered in the Bahamas, and I could tell you, not less than 50% of them are Bahamian owned. Grand Bahama, the Freeport, the Port Authority, 30 years ago, or more actually, 30, 40, 50 years ago, 80% of their licensees were foreigners. Today, 80% of their licensees are Bahamians. So, but we are looking for an impressive economic outcome in ourselves that we can see manifestly, where the prosperity and the multi-millionaire Bahamians are so manifest that nobody can now argue that we haven't made it. That story has not been written for ourselves yet, and that's why we keep harboring of doing better post-majority rule. The truth of the matter is there are some exceptionally wealthy Bahamians in the Bahamas living exceptionally materially abundant lives, and there are the vast majority of Bahamians who are living ordinary lives that probably make them want more. And that's understandable.
And I'll leave that subject there. I know that I will get WhatsApp and text messages from people who are listening, who will have their thoughts on the issue.
For sure.
But the next thing I wanted to raise with you, Brother Lang, is this idea of what to expect from a political directorate, right? Last year, the Attorney General made some statements about bills that would be passed by the end of the year. Rape bill comes to mind. The citizenship bill comes to mind. Those bills did not get passed by the end of the year. The Secretary made some statements as to why that might be the case. But in terms of looking specific pieces of legislation that you might think of as important or as landmark legislation? Does it matter that they didn't come before the end of the year? And what other landmark legislation are you looking forward to?
Well, first, let me say that when the speech from the throne was read, I indicated that the government's legislative agenda was really a light one. So the government forecasted a rather light legislative agenda. And so a few areas reflected any landmark legislative output. Few. The bulk of its legislative agenda, just read the speech from the throne, was about amending legislation. So the government said that they would amend the Debt Management Act. It would amend the Procurement Act. It would amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act. It would amend the Public Financial Management Act. It would amend the Commercial Enterprise Act. It would, it would pass a merchant shipping bill, and it did that, It really, just look at it, it was not a heavy, to my mind, substantial legislative agenda. So I'm not surprised by what has happened. Now, the problem with political directorates like a minister saying we will do this at the end of the year is that he forgets or she forgets that it's the cabinet that determines the legislative agenda. You can, as a minister, aspire towards something, take it to cabinet and hope you can meet the timelines that you set. But the truth of the matter is you take it to cabinet and you are subject to cabinet's agenda. You are subject to the priorities of the prime minister who chairs the cabinet. You are subject to the external and internal happenings that can orientate priorities or change priorities. So really, when I hear a minister say we're going to do this by, I really don't. That doesn't hold a great deal of import to me, because I know that he or she is subject to a collective decision-making process, which can be entirely different than their own timelines.
Do you, the legislation for marital rape or to criminalize rape in marriage is important legislation?
I do. I believe it's important as a statement of a number of things about the values we hold in the country. I think it's important because we have to determine if violence in all its forms is appropriate in the Bahamas. Because remember now, what we are talking about here is forcible sex. Okay, a woman says, I do not want to have sex with you. A man says, I do not want to have sex with you, and is forced to do so. The question for us is that violence or not? Well, if you're forcing me and I'm resisting, how else are you going to do it if violence means the use of force, negative force, right? So it's violence in all its forms, is violence in all its forms a vice that we want to say in law that we are opposed to. Take forcible sex in every other circumstance, and it would be rape. Every other circumstance. The only reason in this circumstance it's not rape is because there is a sentence attached to it. Remember now, if a man and a woman cohabitate and have no marriage license, they say they love each other, have been together for years. If he forces her to have sex, he could be accused of rape. The only difference between him and his counterpart in the same circumstance is a license. So one circumstance defines the thing as violent and the other as non-violent. Is that what we want to do in law? That's the question for us. The second point it makes that we have to question it raises is does a man truly have agency over their own bodies? And is that agency surrendered in marriage? When people use the Bible to say your body is not your own, that they are actually supporting the marital rape argument. Why? If my body is not my own, so his wife's body belongs to him. Since my wife owns my body, why would my wife use her body to rape herself if she don't want to have sex? Why can't she tell her own body, which is mine, no, we are not going to have sex without me saying yes? So does a man and a woman have, in every instance, agency over their own bodies? That's another question. For me, honestly, I mean, listen, we on the spectrum of life, we have a multitude of viewpoints, and so I accept that. For me, this is a clear matter. It's clear in the context of my religious faith. It is clear in the context of morality. It is clear in the context of law. For me, at the moment in law, it is not possible for a man to rape his wife or a wife to rape her husband. Not in our law, not now. On the basis of faith and morality, it is altogether wrong for a man to force his wife to have sex. Altogether wrong.
Yeah.
And the government, frankly, is not moving on this because the government is afraid. The government has about in quote, offending the religious community. That's the reality. In every other circumstance, this would have been done. And in this respect, I believe that those church leaders who are opposed, I think that they are altogether wrong. They don't represent the spirit of Christ in it. They don't represent the truth of Scripture in it. I think that they are wrong.
I have a harder set of words than wrong, but I will accept the leading and guidance of my elder brother and say that I think they are wrong. I have other words, I won't call them Chicago. I read that the head of the Baptist commission in the Bahamas says a man can't rape his wife, and it just my head tried to explode when I read that, because you know that he's not talking about the law, and he's not talking about anything other than his idea that God gave him this woman and she belongs to him. And the idea that a wife or that a husband is property, that they don't have any agency, especially the most fundamental agency over their own body, is just evil incarnate as far as I am concerned.
Well, you know, the thing about it is, what I always imagine is, you know, people in the church community to which I belong always say, what would Jesus do? So I want somebody to imagine Jesus married. Right? Now, for whatever reason, him and his wife have a disagreement. And I want you to imagine the Jesus who will knock at your heart's door waiting for you to invite him in. This is the Christ who created the universe and you, who is knocking at your door, not kicking the door down, not bulldozing the door down, knocking at your door, waiting, and says, if you will open the door, I will come in and sup with you and you with me. That's the nature of this Christ, saying to his wife, well, if you ain't gonna give it to me, I can take it, because that's the spirit of Christ.
Moving to the next. I just want to leave that there for you can't say, I don't think I could say it any better than that. This idea, this is something that has been around, this next thing has been around from, for at least a decade by my count, the Freedom of Information Act. What is it that we are so afraid of? Why can't we just pass and empower? I mean, the act has been passed, but it just seems like administration after administration continues to slow roll on this one.
Well, listen, politicians do things that are not against the law. They're not against the law. They're not even unethical. Right? I'm not talking, there are things a politician can do that may be illegal or unethical, but I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about there are things you do in politics. Maybe they have to do with patronage, in the way you execute a contract, maybe in the way you use government funds and so forth and so forth. That if the light were cast on it, they would be hard pressed to explain it in a manner that is justifiable. So the reluctance to do something, lot less light on something, can only be a reluctance in too many instances of probable shame. Right? And so to our discredit in the political realm, we have been uncertain about how much shame might come to us by virtue of shedding the light of day on some of our behavior. Again, not illegal behavior, maybe not even unethical behavior, but some choice behaviors that might be difficult to explain in the way of, well, this was kind of discriminatory, this was a preference for political personality. Wow, that's a lot of money to have spent on travel in that fashion. You know what I mean? We just don't necessarily want that light to be shined. Now, frankly, I'm a little puzzled by the failure to operationalize the Freedom of Information Act, because the last that I am aware, a head of that office had been appointed and supposedly armed with some resources. So as far as I'm aware, the expeditious rollout of the operations by them should have to the political directors. Just said, I'm ready now. You could go ahead and start fielding requests. So because the law has been passed. The law has been, as far as I'm aware, even assented to. It's a question of operationalizing the machinery for receiving requests from the public.
Yeah, what I saw in my research was that there is the information commissioner is waiting to, he says, going to train people in early this year in the quote unquote the technology that will be used, and also in what ought to be redacted.
Yeah, but is this not like 2-3 years later?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the point that I make. Is it was just, to me it seemed a rather slow grind for them. And normally the bureaucracy is waiting on the political directors, but then this seems to be the opposite case.
And I always I always wonder whether or not there is something. Well, anyway, there must be some reason to drag.
But there can be many. it doesn't even have to be a drag your feet. It could be many reasons. All leadership don't act the same. And I'm talking about bureaucratic leadership. Some leadership are go get them, get it done. They chase, they initiate, and some are quite laid back and so forth. And you can see this in all areas of the public service. Some directors, some permanent secretaries, they are take charge people. Even in the quasi government agencies or regulatory agencies, somehow go get it done, etc. And others are not. So you can't always put that on some nefarious reason. Sometimes it's just the personality of the people in leadership.
Fair enough. And I am happy to accept that with the caveat though that from the hand with the big stick, the political directorate, the appetite that exists to see this legislation.
At one on that clearly, if they wanted this done, it would be done. Clearly. And that's from Ingram to Christie to Minnis to Davis. Absolutely.
If this to me, that's the indictment
yes.
of the entirety of the political directorate.
Fully accepted.
The next thing I wanted to raise with you, I don't know if you were able to pay attention to what the National Security Minister had to say about the new prison. They're supposed to have started. Well, they were supposed to start building the new prison in a couple of days. Actually, I think they said they were going to break ground on the 17th or something like that. But my question is not about the date of the building of the new prison. My question is, given that the commentary around our prison has been what it has been since you were in the Parliament, I believe you all had the CDR report. Isn't that right?
I can't remember. No.
But there was a report from then about the need for new facilities, et cetera.
Yes.
So the fact is they're building a new prison, which will be a co-ed facility, which means they're going to close the women's prison and close the juvenile prison, I understand. But they're only building a prison with a capacity of 820. When the prison population is double that at present, which I don't think includes the people on remand. So what is going on there?
Well, I don't have enough facts to know. I don't have the numbers. I don't know what the layout of the proposed new prison. I don't know what might be the intent in terms of using like the existing facilities, maybe for something else. So honestly, I don't know if that the prison is coming with some reforms to the way we process indictments or convictions, so that maybe there's I don't know. And this is one of the challenges I think we have had far too long in government is in the way we treat the public in respect of certain things. The prison is a part of your national security machinery. It is a fundamental. I would think that something like this doesn't warrant a statement that we're going to break grounds, but a fulsome statement, communication to Parliament, to the country about this system, this situation. I think it's a really meaningful something to be doing, and that you who pay attention to these matters as we do are armed with certain information. I think begs some additional things to be done to help us be more aware.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the building of a new prison is a positive thing, but I think that the number of questions that are left are not necessary. I think you could just say this is why this number was chosen. This is how it's going to work.
But I'm saying if you are building a new prison, there you should have a fulsome statement that says we are now commencing. We have gone out to bidders. We have now secured architectural renderings. We have gone out to contractors. We have secured a new prison. We have looked at modern day security requirements of a prison. This is what the new prison is going to include. Bam, 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 bam. Its capacity is going to be 800. And while that might appear to be too insufficient for blah, 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 here is why we think it is more than adequate, blah, 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 blah. And so you're armed with good information about a very positive development in the country.
That is entirely my view. And I think that they could have said that or something like that. And the fact that they didn't is, I think it is symptomatic.
It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, but it's symptomatic of what I guess I have to call it either an inability or an unwillingness to consider the public and their reaction to whatever it is you're doing. You could tell. I mean, you have to know. You're going to stand in front of a bunch of reporters and say, we building a new prison. They have questions.
Yes. Well, is it not? Is it to the discredit of the reporters that they didn't pose these questions? And if they didn't get an answer, to write and report, no answer on this, no answer on that, no answer on the next thing.
I plead the fifth.
I didn't say. I'm not saying they didn't ask. I'm just saying, right?
Yeah. I
think if they had asked and gotten no answers, then that's a story.
I agree 179%, and I would go so far as to say they didn't ask. But I wasn't there, so in any event. Okay, so the new year has ticked over. We saw the Free National Movement over the last year and change. I think they continue to struggle to really find a lane. Pintard, as a leader, has been not as impactful, I think, as he would have wished, and the party has done its best, I think, to hold the administration accountable. But do you feel like what do you feel like their next their direction has to be in the coming?
Well, to be honest,
I'll ask the same question about the PLP as well.
Right. I think that the Free National Movement, Mr. Pintard, I think has made headway. I think he has been able to highlight some things that have gotten frontline story status and have begun some conversations around issues and so forth. Has it been a kind of massive unfolding? No, not at all. So I think some progress has been made there. But when you are in opposition, your aim has to be to put your thoughts and ideas in the minds and mouths of people in the country, right? So you and them have to connect on the things you're commenting on, things you're doing. That's really the aim. That's the bottom line, because your aim is to become the next government of the Bahamas, and you can only become that when the majority of voters believe that you are their person to run their country next. And the way they do that is they have to lean into what you say as a description, and then in doing that leaning to think, you know what, if somebody understands my problem this succinctly, if they understand the country's issues this well, then they're probably the best people to govern and to try to solve these problems, particularly given some of the solutions they are offering. That's really the aim, and that's where they have to go. That's the be all and end all of it all, every day, every week, every month, up to and after the election. That's the bottom line.
And the challenge has always been to say whether they are capable of making that argument.
They're always capable. They're always capable. What it is, life is kind of weird, because when you are out of a spot, like you can hear and see more readily and easily what the people around you are hearing and seeing. When you get in, there's an added set of noise that can distort or drown out what you are able to hear, and crowds are able to get what you are now in, and the voices that are speaking to you and the things that are being pondered about the machinery itself, about egos themselves, and you have to contend with all of that. And so you can miss your mark because of the era of noise, or because of a bias you might show or demonstrate in your decision making. All of us in leadership face this. And so what is necessary is really to find a means by which to hear again and see again the people you serve always, and to speak on the matters that matter to them, to address the things that matter to them, and the things matter to you that do not matter to them, to persuade them of the importance of the things that matter to you, that should matter to them.
And as you say, you believe that Pintard and his crew possess the capability to.
All of us do. All of us do, Brother Quincy. All of us do. Honestly, all of us do. If we are careful to be better listeners, more humble servants, and more careful collaborators, all of us do, and cooperate. Even when we don't show it, we can develop the skill to do it.
Fair enough. And I wanted to, I have 7 minutes to talk to you about NIB. And you also mentioned the revenue. I part of my earlier comments in the show talked about what Shonda had to say about those same 50,000 businesses, and only 9,000 of them reported earnings, reported turnover of more than $100,000, which would make them VAT registrants. And I think that's very, her position is that can't possibly be true.
Well, let me tell you why you got to be careful, like on that score, because I heard your commentary on it, and I don't mean careful you, I mean careful her, anyone, right? Mm-hmm. This economy has let's say the economy has a $12 billion gross domestic product, right? If you average the revenue, if you took that 12 billion to be your revenue for businesses, divided that by the 50,000 business registrants, you'd get an average revenue of $240,000. Now, given that is true, you know something is wrong, because you know that a minority of businesses in the Bahamas make substantially most of the revenue in the business community. You have a lot of small businesses. Now, is she right that there are probably businesses underreporting? I have no doubt. I have no doubt whatsoever. But that is a perennial problem. That has been true here and throughout the world, where people have been trying to avoid or minimize paying taxes, right? So that is true. And it is their job then to try and weed that out. But it isn't, the Bahamas' economy is a small one. 50,000 registrants is a lot, but it is not inconceivable that multiple thousands of them make under $100,000. That's not inconceivable at all.
Okay. NIB. I started reporting on the forecast reviews when I started at the Bahama Journal and Love 97 News in 2005, 2006. The last actuary review says the funds reserved.
I heard since we running out of time, I heard your very careful and detailed account of what the actuary report says and the urgency of this matter. I heard it, and I thought you were advocating, you were asking people, if you know anybody who is in power, tell them what they have to do, etc. Right? But the people to whom you are appealing are the people who, the folks who won't do anything about this, are afraid will rebel against them for raising this rate. And that has always been at the heart of this problem, that they are scared that raising the rate, and guess what, Quincy? If the rate is raised by the amount that is recommended by the board, we're talking about you and I paying an extra probably $4 a week at the minimum. Maybe $10 a week more. $40 a month, $50 a month, or so forth, right? More. Mm-hmm. Now, are you prepared, and am I prepared, to not pay that additional sum of money to save the fund?
I certainly am prepared.
and see, but this is the question for the political directorate, is they are calculating that if they do this, too many people will hate it and hate them. Yeah, here's the thing, though. What is a rate increase? We have to the board has to redefine it. A rate increase is an increased savings for me. You realize that?
Yeah.
It's my saving 1% more than I currently do for a benefit I'm going to get later on. How is that a problem for me? The increase, Quincy, could easily be less sodas, less cheese doodle, just less entertainment. It is not less rent, less mortgage payment, less group, but it's increased savings for me. Frankly, the fare is ridiculous on our part. It has always been ridiculous because we will not simply educate our folk about the real deal about these things. It's savings. It's savings.
Okay. We have less than a minute left, so I'm going to leave that there. I think that you, however, have given, and I sincerely hope they're listening, but you have given the political directorate language to use that I think is incredibly useful in terms of trying to have this conversation with a skittish public. Yes, people are definitely going to be afraid because that is the nature of this kind of conversation. You get scared that, you asking me. But the fact is, as you say, and as I said in my comments earlier, this is our national pension plan. You are only benefiting yourself by putting more money away.
Yeah. Let's stop saving the board. Let's stop saving the fund. How about we just increase our savings? Let's just do like 1%.
It can't be. It almost seems like it can't be that simple, but it really is.
That's what it is.
All right. Thanks as usual for a great
Anytime.
I really appreciate your time, man.
Anytime, my friend.
All right.
Have a great. Bye-bye, folks.
Take care. Folks, that's going to do it for us here on the Political Review this week. Thank you very much for joining us for our first live show of the year. And up next, let's talk together in English with Lady T. We will see you next week. God bless. Wally, you are the man. Happy 2023, everybody.